So my name is Carly Jurek. Been doing these nutrition talks with the Fitness Center for a year now. So excited that they've been popular. I love doing them, and I'm excited to try out a little bit of a new format for this one. But yeah, so my name is Carly Jurek. I am a registered dietitian and a wellness coordinator through Urest Services, which is what provides the food service for the BP Houston campus. This month we're going to be talking about meal prepping. I know for me personally, 2020 was kind of crazy, and for me, it felt like things just got a little bit chaotic. So I feel like the past couple of weeks I've spent a little bit of time just like focusing on the basics. How can we get organized again? How can we kind of get in a little bit of a routine? And one of those things that I think is really important is meal prepping. So I thought it was a really relevant subject starting a new year. Here we are in January. So these are my tips, my tricks as a dietitian, and honestly, a lot of what I incorporate into planning for my family and how I feed my husband and my very rambunctious little 2-year-old. Okay, so first off, I always like to have a pretty good definition of what we're talking about. So what is meal prepping? And I kept this definition really, really basic because I think a lot of times people view meal prepping as laying out all these containers and having it beautifully organized and all these components. And that's not necessarily the case. So meal prepping is basically just preparing meals and consuming them at a later time. I would even add preparing components of meals and consuming them at a later time. It's really very flexible, depends on your lifestyle, depends on what works for you and your schedule. But why are people meal prepping? Why is that such a trend? Why is that so popular? First off, it's very convenient. It's easy to grab food. It's already prepared. You're not in the hustle and bustle trying to figure out where you're going to serve your family. In my case, you don't have a screaming 2-year-old wanting food, and it's going to take you 30 minutes to cook food. So it's just a little bit more convenient, easier for you to get healthy, nutritious foods on the table for your family. It can be much cheaper if you batch cook or cook in bulk. It can sometimes, I'm going to say sometimes, be healthier depending on how you do it. It can help you save time and lots of other benefits. So meal prepping really can be really beneficial for you and your family, however you want to incorporate it. And who can meal prep? Anybody can meal prep. It's really not that complicated. But I would tell you, if you're somebody who doesn't like leftovers, meal prepping might not be for you because it's essentially almost eating leftovers. So that's definitely something to take into consideration before you invest a lot of money and a lot of time into it. So before you get started, these are a couple of the basics that I would suggest that you start with for meal prepping. One of the first questions you want to ask yourself is, how do you want to store your foods after you prepare them? So you want to find a container that suits your purposes. So I know for my family, I really prefer using the reusable. I know other people prefer using the disposable, completely up to preference, but this is one of those questions you want to ask yourself. What works best for your family? Do you want them, family style? Do you want them individual? Do you want them compartments? Do you not want them compartments? But a couple things to look for when you're purchasing your storage. If you're getting ones that are reusable, you want to get ones that are BPA free. They are microwave safe, dishwasher safe, freezer safe. They're very durable. They're easy to clean. There are so many out there on the market that I'm not even going to try to tell you which ones to look at because there's lots of options. I know for me, we have different sizes. I have individual sizes that I can put stuff for my son or my husband in, but then I also have larger casserole style dishes that I can prepare like a whole lasagna and just freeze it. So it really depends on what works for your family, and just make that decision based off of what you think would be best. And then the next thing a lot of people ask is, how long can you store those meal prepped ingredients? The short answer is there's not really an answer. It kind of depends on the type of food that you're prepping. But as a general rule of thumb, it's good to know that the longer you store foods in the refrigerator, the more those foods do slowly start to deteriorate. So, and it really comes down to personal preference. If you if you don't mind eating foods that have been in the refrigerator a couple days, or if you do, you're going to have to kind of play with it and see what works best for you and what you get the most enjoyment out of. And like I said, it depends on the type of food. Things like sauteed veggies, for me, don't seem to hold as long. So I only keep them for a couple of days, and I try to eat them the next day or the following day because they do start getting a little bit on the mushier side, not as appetizing. But those more hearty vegetables, like roasted potatoes, roasted broccoli, things like that, will have a little bit of a longer life than those like sauteed veggies. And then as a general rule, if you just want some basic guidelines to start with, this next screen, you guys are welcome to take a photo of it. We'll share the slides after this, but this is by the FDA, and it's a refrigerator and a freezer storage chart. It gives you all kinds of different foods that are prepared, raw, etc., and how long they recommend storing it, both in the refrigerator and the freezer. So this is a really good resource to kind of start when you're playing around and starting meal prepping to see how long certain foods will hold. Okay, so the next thing we'll talk about is foods that are good for meal prepping. There are some foods that are really great and hold up great to meal prepping, and then there's some foods that I wouldn't suggest meal prepping. I would maybe cook them then and enjoy them as soon as you've cooked them. So foods that tend to be really good are those really hearty grains and beans. So things like rice, farro, quinoa, couscous. Those are really great for meal prepping. You can do large batch cooks and make a really large portion of it, and that could stay in the refrigerator upwards of 5 to 7 days, and it'll hold up pretty well in the refrigerator. Certain cooked meats have a pretty good shelf life of 2 to 3 days, 3 to 4 days, depending on the meat. It depends on the cut of the meat too, and how tender it is and how moist you want that meat to stay. But then also roasted vegetables are good for meal prepping. Whole fruits. I kind of thought this one was interesting when I said a whole fruit. You don't have to prep an apple. What I mean by whole fruits is things like pineapple. If you purchase the whole pineapple, pre-cutting it, storing it in the refrigerator, watermelon, cantaloupe, fruits like that are really great, where if you already have everything out, you're already chopping a bunch of things, go ahead and chop that, store in the refrigerator for a couple days. And then also sauces, dips, hummus, tzatziki, salsa, any of those are going to be really great and have a pretty good shelf life. And then any hearty fresh vegetable. And these are going to be more of the raw vegetables. So things like slicing bell pepper for a snack to have with hummus, or cutting up carrots into little bite-sized pieces so you can have them as a snack. Things like that are going to be really great to do beforehand, and they'll have a reasonably high, long shelf life. Okay, foods that aren't as good for meal prepping, meaning once you kind of cook them or you alter them and you start preparing them, they start to deteriorate. So things like soft fruits, vegetables, those going to be things like washing your berries. They actually recommend not to wash berries until you are sitting down to eat them, because as soon as you introduce that moisture to the berry, it actually starts the cell wall to start weakening, and so it'll start getting a little bit on the soggier side. Same with lettuce. You can always like pre-chop lettuce and then store that. If you're going to do that, I would store it in a plastic bag and actually poke holes with scissors in the bag, and that allows oxygen to go into the lettuce and it helps keep it fresher for longer. And then certain cut fruits are not as good in the refrigerator pre-chopped. And then crunchy foods, things like coated fish with like panko crumbs that you go to reheat. That crunchy food, actually, when you reheat it, can turn soggy. So the best example I can think of is French fries. When you go to reheat French fries, they're just kind of a soggy mess and not as crunchy and crisp. Probably not the best example, but that's what I envision with crunchy foods, is they just don't hold up as long or as well to the reheating. And then other foods that I would say aren't the best for meal prepping, seafood doesn't really have a super long life after you've cooked it. So I wouldn't necessarily do 5 days worth of, sauteed or cooked broiled like salmon or tilapia. I would actually cook those and enjoy it the next day and probably not have it too much longer than that. Okay, so there are so many different types of meal prepping, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time discussing different ways because I know for me, if people ask me if I meal prepped, I'd probably say no because for a long time in my mind, I envisioned it as laying out all these containers and having a perfectly portioned chicken breast with rice and a veggie and like having everything individually portioned. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I actually do meal prep. I just do it very differently than what maybe traditionally you're seeing. So these are some different ways that you could actually be meal prepping and you might not even realize it. So especially with working from home, one of my favorite things to do is I just need a break from the screen. I need a break from work for a little bit. So towards the afternoon, if I have 30 minutes, I'll get up and I'll actually go to my kitchen and I'll just chop my veggies for dinner that I'm cooking that night. And I'll spend about 30 minutes. I'll prep them, put them in the refrigerator, and then I'll go back to work. And that's actually considered a form of meal prepping. You could even go as far as just grouping all of your items for breakfast together in the refrigerator. So, when it comes time to making breakfast for your children, you or your spouse knows how exactly what you're cooking that week. And here's all the ingredients. I just have to grab them and assemble them. That can be a form of meal prepping. It could be making overnight oats the night before. It could be cooking and freezing quick reheatable breakfast items. And this is actually where I think I personally do my most meal prepping. Mornings in our house is a little bit chaotic. So I tend to make frozen burritos for my husband and I to eat for breakfast. But then I make frozen whole grain muffins for my son. So he has something as soon as he wakes up. I make these egg bites, which is actually what we'll be demoing here in a little bit. And sometimes I put half in the refrigerator for us to enjoy over the week, and then I put half in the freezer for us to have at a later date. And so that's where I tend to do most of my prepping is I really like to do big batch cooking and freezing half, putting half aside for us to enjoy throughout that week. It could be starting a crock pot before you leave for the day. Crock pots are one of my favorite things, one of my favorite meals to cook because all of the work is done in the morning when I have the most energy. I get it done in the morning. I walk in the door in the afternoon. Dinner is ready. We can eat whenever people are hungry, and it's the most simple, low stress way for me to get dinner on the table. And then you can also make and freeze dinners beforehand. That can be defrosted and heated. As an expecting mother, I know I'm already have a long list of freezer meals that I want to go ahead and make before this baby comes, and that's something I will definitely be prepping. There's so many different options out there. You can make, like I said, a veggie lasagna that goes in a casserole dish. You literally take it from the freezer, put it in the oven. You don't even have to let it defrost. There's some great crock pot dump and pour freezer meals where you put them in baggies and you just dump them in the crock pot. Lots of different options there, but those are some of my favorite ways to prepare for my family. Okay, so how can you get started meal prepping? First off, start small. Don't start trying to prep every single meal of every single day for the week. What's probably going to happen is you're going to sit down at it and you're just going to feel really overwhelmed. You're going to have to spend hours in the kitchen and you're just going to realize like, this isn't worth it. I'm not going to do this. It's not sustainable. I'm not going to do it. So the best way is to just focus on one meal for a couple weeks, and that's what you prep until you kind of get your feet on the ground, you know what you're doing, and then from there you can expand. The other thing is only prep for about 2 or 3 days to start. There's a lot of reasons behind this. First off, it helps you kind of gauge out, am I actually eating the food? It can help lower the amount of food waste you have. But it also gives you a good idea on, how long do I enjoy these leftovers after they're prepared? And it really allows you to kind of gauge that and adjust based off of what you are eating, what you're enjoying eating, etc. And then the next thing is start by prepping things that include the full meal. there's this really great dietitian blogger that I follow who I call the queen of meal prepping. And what she's actually started doing is she just preps like different components that throughout the week she can mix and match to prepare meals. I think that's a little bit more advanced. And so what I would suggest is starting with something that you know is going to be a complete meal. It's going to have that grain, a protein, a vegetable, everything's included, and you're going to prep that and eat that throughout part of the week. And then find an area that you want to make more nutrient dense and really focus your efforts on that. So for me personally, I found that my husband and I were great for lunch and dinner, but it was really breakfast that we both kind of struggled finding something filling, satisfying, but then also nutritious that we could make while we were running out the door. And so that's where I've really focused most of my effort, is because that's where I thought we were kind of lacking in our nutrition. And then next, when you're starting, a really simple formula to just think of as you're preparing and you're starting to think through meal prepping, include a grain, cook a protein, and then cook a vegetable. And then with that creates a whole meal, but then that also allows a little bit of flexibility. If you batch cook the grain, say you do brown rice, you can do a stir fry one night that you have the rice. And then the next rice, if you have extra rice, you can then make a veggie fried rice, or you can just have a salmon with a side of rice. It really allows you to have more options, but it gives you a pretty good direction on where you're going to get started. And then these are just some of the ideas that I could think of for ways to meal prep. It's not all inclusive. I was trying to include as many different things as I could, so I won't go over all of it, but some of my favorite are the veggie and egg cups for breakfast, doing pancakes or a berry muffin, breakfast burritos, breakfast sandwiches for my family, and then lunch, doing anything from baked potatoes to do a loaded potato, leftovers, hard-boiled eggs. Those are a personal favorite because those are really a great way to add some good filling protein, but also a like nutrition powerhouse. And then for dinner, pre-chopping veggies for stir fries, having frozen crock pot meals, frozen lasagnas, prepared salads or grains that I can throw together to prepare a salad. Any of those are great. And then snacks, having pre-portioned fruits and yogurt for smoothies. You can do energy bites, granola, parfaits, hummus, hard-boiled eggs, sliced veggies, etc. So those are some of my best suggestions for meal prepping. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and then I'm going to turn on my camera. And then this is where we'll actually hop on over to one of my favorite ways to meal prep. You guys have kind of heard me talk about that a little bit, and it is actually, the recipe was on the slideshow, so we'll send that out to you guys, so you guys will have it at the end. But they're little egg bites that have some veggies in them. I don't know if you can see, but they're super simple to make. They're really easy for breakfast, snacks, a good way to add some protein, but then they also have those vegetables in them. So that's what I'm going to walk you through today on how to prepare. And I just saw the chat. Sorry, Mr. Archie is away at school, but he does absolutely love helping me in the kitchen. He would love to be a part of this, which is why he probably needs to be at school, because he's not always the cleanest helper. Okay, so I'm gonna see if you tilt this down and see if you guys can see. I'll walk you through all of the ingredients. Can you guys see my little cookie sheet? Okay, so first off, I went ahead and pre-cracked the eggs just to save a little bit of time, but these are just 6 regular eggs. A lot of times I get questions on, do I do brown eggs, white eggs, free-range eggs, etc. Those are just basic white eggs. I personally buy the Eggland's Best because they fortify it with omega-3s, and I like the extra nutrition. It's going to be 1 bell pepper that we'll dice, 1 green onion, about 1/4 cup of whole milk. We're using whole milk because of my son. We haven't quite switched over to the low-fat milk, Both are great options. And then we have just some spinach that we'll cut up into little pieces, and then some shredded cheese. So with that, I'm going to take just a second to kind of shuffle my my station. If you guys have any questions, I'll go ahead and take a few of those as I'm setting up. Oh, thank you. My kitchen is my happy place. I got a comment about Live the Kitchen. Thank you. Okay. So, real quick, one of the best things you can do in your kitchen as you're trying to learn to cook is learn how to chop vegetables, but then also you want to start with a sharp knife. Okay, a sharp knife is your best tool in the kitchen. If you have a sharp knife, it makes it way easier to chop things, cut things, and you're actually less likely to hurt yourself. And then I'm gonna point you back down. Okay, so the other thing is I actually have a wet paper towel under this cutting board. The reason why I do that is it actually keeps the cutting board stable, and it keeps it from sliding around like crazy, and gives you a little bit more stability as you're cooking. So what we're gonna do, we have our eggs, and then we have our 1/4 cup of milk. So start off, you're just gonna add that to your bowl. We're gonna add a little bit of pepper. You can add more or less depending on your preferences. My little toddler is kind of at a point where he dislikes anything spicy. So we do a little bit less of the pepper for him, because then all we hear is spice when he eats food. So, and then I added a little bit of salt, just a pinch, and then we're just gonna whisk those eggs until the eggs and the milk are combined. And this is where, if you have kiddos or a toddler like mine, this is where I can incorporate him in the kitchen, is letting him just stir the eggs. He thinks he's involved, he has a ball, and it's a very safe activity for him to be in the kitchen. Okay, so next we have a bell pepper, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna chop the bell pepper. But I'm gonna give you a couple tips on how to make this go a lot faster. So we're gonna cut the stem off, and then we're actually gonna cut the other end off too. And what that does is it gives you a level-ish, I had a funky shaped bell pepper, but a level cutting surface for the bell pepper, but it also makes it easier for you to access the seeds and like that little white pith in there. So we're just gonna remove all that. And we'll get all the seeds out. And then from there, if you don't have a wonky shaped bell pepper like mine, it's much easier for you to cut it into, go ahead, do it this way. Cut it into little slices like this. And like I said, this is kind of a funky bell pepper, so it's not coming out as nice as it normally does, but it lets you cut it into those really great thin slices. And then from there, we're just going to turn it sideways, and we're going to give it a really quick dice. I'm keeping my cuts on the bell pepper really small. I'm doing that intentionally because my 2-year-old doesn't always love it when I put vegetables in there. And I've noticed if I cut it into much smaller pieces, he's less likely to notice it's there. So just for my family, we do much smaller cuts. You don't have to do it that way if you want to save the time, but that's what works in my family. And if you have kiddos of the same age who are kind of struggling with vegetables, that's one of the biggest tips I can tell you, is you got to kind of mix it in there to where they can't quite see that's what you're giving them. So we're just going to go ahead and do that with the other half of the bell pepper. And then we'll do a quick dice on that side. And as I'm doing this, I'm just adding it to the bowl with the whisked eggs. Okay, almost done. And one thing I actually didn't mention about the eggs that I meant to is eggs are actually kind of gotten a bad rap. They're kind of like fats, where for a long time we were told not to eat them because of the cholesterol and its impact on your heart health. There's actually been so much research come out in the past probably about a decade about the benefits of eggs, that has now been removed from the dietary guidelines. They're actually recommending eggs as a vital nutrient for toddlers, women who are of childbearing age, things like that, because of two nutrients. It's lutein and choline are the two nutrients that are of concern for those populations, and eggs are one of the best sources of that. So if you're worried about the eggs, that is no longer a recommendation. They even recommend, I think right now it's currently, you can have 1 egg per day and stay within your recommended daily recommendation for nutrition. Okay, so next we have the spinach. And what I've been doing as I've been talking is I've actually just been stacking the spinach. I don't know if you guys can see there. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to kind of roll it like a burrito. And then I'm just going to go and do a thin slice on the spinach. This technique is called a chiffonade. And what it is it just cuts the spinach into much smaller pieces. And previous note, my toddler absolutely detests spinach. Anytime it's in something, he picks it out. So I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time, and I'm just going to cut it into really small pieces so he doesn't notice that it's in there. And then I'm going to add it to our eggs. You don't necessarily have to go this far. You could even do a rough chop on the spinach. It really depends on what works for your family. I'm just kind of appeasing my picky toddler by doing this. So we're going to do a couple rounds of that. We need about 3/4 cup of spinach. The great thing about this recipe, though, is it doesn't have to be exact measurements. You can add more veggies, you can add less. If these are veggies that your family maybe won't eat, you can always swap this out for other options. Some great options would be mushroom, broccoli, really finely chopped up broccoli, bell pepper, green onion, obviously. Trying to think of anything else that you could add in here. Carrots would probably be fine. The great thing about recipes like this are they are really easy for you to customize. So we're going to do one more round on the spinach. And then we'll call that good on the spinach. And then the last 2 ingredients that we need to add is we're actually going to take a green onion. And it's just 1 green onion that we're going to chop the fuzzy end off. And then it calls for about 2 tablespoons, so it's about half of this green onion. And I'm going to do just really thin slices on it. The green onion doesn't necessarily have to be in this recipe. It just adds a little bit of flavor. So if you want to add it, if you don't add it. That's probably one of the biggest things I've learned in cooking is just learning how to determine what my family is going to enjoy eating and how to customize it. Seeing ingredients that are in the recipe, but not necessarily necessary. It really makes cooking a lot more fun, and it makes it easier for you to customize. So we're just going to take all of these green onions. We're going to add them in. And then, so we have them all in our bowl. The last thing we have is about half a cup of cheese. So I'm using pre-shredded full-fat cheddar cheese. But I'm using extra sharp cheddar cheese. I like using the extra sharp because it has way more flavor than the mild or the medium. And if it has more flavor, then you can use less of it. And so it packs a lot more, like flavor punch than just the mild or the medium sharpness of the cheese. So we're just going to give that a good little mix. Like I said, this recipe is super duper easy. It doesn't take a lot of equipment, doesn't take a lot of skills. So once that's mixed together, we are now ready to put it in our muffin tin. So I'm gonna set this to the side. I've made in my lifetime a lot of egg bakes, and I will go ahead and tell you that they tend to stick if you're using a metal plate, or a metal muffin tin. So I actually got these really great silicone muffin cups. They pop the eggs right out. They don't stick. You don't even have to grease them. So that's what I'm going to be using. If you're using a metal muffin tin, I would spray the little cups very, very heavily with cooking spray just to make sure that the muffins don't stick, because if they do stick, it's kind of a pain to get off. Out of the way. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to scoop out a little bit of this mixture into each muffin, little muffin cup. I'm going to fill it about halfway to 2/3 full. You can always add more if you want a little bit of a bigger serving size, but that's about what my toddler eats. So that's what we're going to fill it up to. Another thing you can do, you can always do little mini muffin tins if you'd like. The really only thing that will change is the cooking time will be just a little bit less, but that is also a great option if you have those. So we'll go ahead and fill these all up. And I have my oven preheated to 375. So once I have these all filled out or filled in with the mixture, I'm just going to pop that into the oven, and they cook for about 25 minutes. Every oven is a little bit different, so I would tell you to definitely check after about 25 minutes and not be surprised if it needs to go a little bit longer or if they're ready. You want to look for the eggs to be set, and best way for me to describe that is give the little pan a jiggle, and if the eggs are still moving, they need to bake for a little bit longer. Go ahead and get that all filled up. And then, like I said, this is the finished product. They're going to go in the oven for about 25 minutes. And then this is the finished product. So nice little bite-sized egg cups. I store them in the refrigerator for about 4 to 5 days. We go through them pretty quick. Since I've made 2 batches here, I'll actually freeze one batch for a later week when we don't have something already prepped, and then I'll be good to go for the next couple weeks. So finished product, very, very easy. Takes you about 20 minutes in the kitchen, and you've already prepped a very nutritious, well-balanced breakfast option. You can serve this with a side of oatmeal. You could do a bowl of cereal on the side. It really just opens up a lot more options for your breakfast. So I think I've heard a couple chats, so I'm going to jump over there and see if there's any questions there. Okay. Oh, thank you. Congratulations for the new baby. Thank you. We're so excited. He's going to be here before we know it. It's kind of in that period where I'm like, I need to start getting things ready. Let's see. Does anyone have a good website with nutrition facts on food ingredients, especially veggies? I have a teenager who decides to try a vegetarian diet recently, and we're concerned about his daily protein need. So one of the best websites, which hands down best websites for nutrition data, is actually through the USDA. If you Google USDA nutrient database, that is going to be the most accurate database that you can find. And they have packaged products, whole fruits, whole veggies, cooked veggies, uncooked veggies. It's like borderline overwhelming how much information, but if you want the most accurate information, I would go to the USDA database. And then I see a couple answering about my MyFitnessPal. MyFitnessPal is good. I would caution you with MyFitnessPal because anybody can go in and upload nutrition data, so it can be a really good resource, but it's not always the most accurate. So good place to start, but still double check on that one. Okay, we had a question on how much cheese. It's about 1/2 cup. When I'm cooking, I don't always measure, but the recipe calls for about 1/2 cup. You can use more, you can use less, you can eliminate the cheese if you'd like. Really, that's the great thing about this recipe, is it really is easy for you to customize. Okay, and then we have a question, do those green boxes really help veggies longer in the refrigerator? I will be honest. I don't think I can answer that question only because I have not personally ever used one. And so I've experience with them. I'm sure if you go to their website, they have lots of statistics on how they improve, but I don't have any experience on it. So if somebody does have experience, I would love to hear what that is. But I personally don't use them. I think what I have works fine, but like I said, I don't have any experience with it. And it looks like those are all of the questions. If you guys would like to unmute yourself and ask any other questions, I am happy to answer whatever questions you guys have. All right. Well, that concludes the class. I'll hang around, like I said, for a couple minutes. You guys are welcome to hang out. Here's a question. Okay. Would you recommend freezing the veggie egg muffins? I'm sorry. There we go. Would you recommend freezing the veggie egg muffins you just demonstrated or make fresh? I personally freeze them. We've had good experience with them. I just use one of my containers at the freezer tank. Put them in the freezer the night before. I think we might want one. I put them in the refrigerator, let them defrost. And honestly, like sometimes when I tell like these hold, sometimes you read them, they reheat fairly well. And so we have pretty good experience freezing them, and they freeze great. Thank you for that question. That's a good question. Yeah. All right. Well, like I said, I'll be here for a little bit. You guys are welcome to throw more questions my way, and if not, thank you for joining. I'm excited for our next topic.
Thanks a lot, Carly. You were kind of breaking up a little bit towards the end there, but I've also included the PDF of the presentation in the chat box, and I will post it on the website as well.
Okay, perfect.
bpfitnesscenter.net under the nutrition tab.
Perfect. If you guys didn't happen to hear the answer to your question, you're always welcome to reach out to me via Teams or email, whatever works. I'm happy to answer your questions.